welcome to the Mel Cave Podcast. I'm your host, Melody, and I know you're all thinking, hey, it's been a while since we've heard from you. This is true. It's actually been 3 months since I recorded my last podcast. Work and life, mainly work, got in the way. And actually, I didn't think about recording another podcast until my little brother kept hounding me to put another one out. So, Victor, this episode is for you. Hopefully you learned something. Now, since today is my 3rd episode, I'm going to be talking about the 3 most important things that I've learned in life. These might sound a little dismal, but hopefully by the end, you guys will be inspired. Oh, I guess I should say these are the 3 most important things I've learned in life so far. So, without further ado, number 1. You have to learn to be your own hero. As small children, growing up, we are taught by various animation companies that if your life is terrible, if you're driven into the woods to go into hiding and live with small dwarves, if you are locked into the attic of your stepmother's home and forced to do all the chores by your evil stepsisters, don't worry, your Prince Charming is going to ride in on a white steed at some point and solve all of your problems. And in the process, you two will fall madly in love, and he'll sweep you off your feet, and you'll both ride into the sunset, followed by little bluebirds, and become a freaking princess, and your life will be great. And then as we grow up, we learn this is not the case. Very often, your Prince Charming, or even for men, your Princess Charming, is too busy trying to save themselves to even begin to worry about saving you. And at first, this can be a pretty devastating realization. But honestly, if you think about it, it's not that bad of a thing. And here's why. We are all humans, and we all have the capacity to fail. Because of this, we will at some point in our lives disappoint some person. Very often, this is going to be someone who is close to you. What does this mean? If we all have the capacity to disappoint someone who is close to us, someone who is close to us will disappoint us at some point. Very often it's the person you love. And if you spend all your time investing all of your happiness into one person, instead of relying on yourself and investing your happiness in yourself, then when this person inevitably lets you down, you're going to crumble. Especially if you're not an emotionally resilient person. Your life will seem like it is over. It's not the case, but it's the truth. That's how many people handle this situation. So, you have to realize you can't do that. You have to be your own hero. You say to yourself, and you say to me, I am not special. I do not have superhero qualities. How can I be my own hero? That leads us to our second point. And this is a very important point. You have to take responsibility for your own life. It is not easy to do this because in today's society, the victim mentality is very prevalent. And it's not just in one generation. It's across all generations. I've seen all age groups and the victims that are in them. Now, I was Googling tips on taking responsibility for your own life. And along the way, I found an article, it's a short article, about the benefits of accepting personal responsibility. I actually found it on transformationalstudies.com, and the author is Barbara Lynn Fried. So I'm just going to read this to you real quick. Accepting personal responsibility for your life can be profoundly transformational, as it enables you to live consciously and be in charge of everything that happens to you. The keys to this enlightened way of life are through self-examination and with a commitment to change. When you take responsibility for all your decisions, mistakes, and life situations, you generate freedom from the cycle of blaming others for your problems and becoming a victim. By harnessing self-awareness, clear perception of who you are, and conscious choice, you become empowered to change the course of your life. In this way, you can understand your weaknesses, build on your strength, and make necessary improvements to your character. By taking full responsibility for all of your actions and non-actions, and by owning all of your personal issues, you will empower yourself and move towards creating a fruitful life. Now, I thought that was a good article and very eye-opening. Let's talk about some of the things that are mentioned. It says that it will enable you to live consciously and be in charge of everything that happens to you. A lot of people say to themselves, I want to be in charge of my life. Maybe I am a control freak and I don't want to let anyone else have the reins. But then they get stuck in this victim mentality and they start blaming everything that happens on everyone else around them. And what they're doing is giving others the power over their life, giving others the power over your reactions. And if you do this, you're just going to get stuck at the bottom where you are. You're not going to move up. You're not going to experience success because you're too busy letting others control your life. You have to accept personal responsibility. Again, it is not easy. You have to have some self-discipline in order to do this. But inevitably, you will be happier. Good things will happen for you. And even if bad things do happen, you'll be more, like I said before, emotionally resilient and better in control of your reactions to what happened to you. You will have an easier time moving around these things and finding the positive aspects of the things that have gone wrong and moving on with your life instead of wallowing in a pit of despair. This might sound like a lot of work. So what do we do? If we're going to take responsibility for our own life, how do we make it easier on ourselves? One way that I've found has worked for me, especially when I'm going through a very hard time, maybe I'm feeling a little depressed, sometimes I have to take a step back and just celebrate the small victories. What do I mean by that? We all know what big victories are. Getting a new promotion, maybe writing a book and getting it published, getting a part in a play, things like that. But there are also small victories in our lives, especially if you're down. For example, if you get up and you go to the gym on time before you go to work, that's a small victory. If you get your dishes done, even though you're swamped with housework, that's a small victory. If you eat healthy for the day, that's a small victory. If you reach out to somebody you love and give them a phone call when you haven't talked to them forever, that's a small victory. Do you see where I'm going with this? All of these things are small victories. All of these things are worthy of celebrating and feeling good about yourself. And in the process of doing this, you'll start to build self-confidence. What happens when you build self-confidence? You start having an easier time of taking responsibility for your life. And what happens when you start taking responsibility for your life? You start taking responsibility for your own happiness. You become your own hero. Do you see how it all ties in together? These are all very important things. They're not the only important things, but I feel like if you can grasp these three concepts, you'll have an easier time having a fuller and happier life. As the podcast comes to a close, I would like to tell you a story about Sue Aikens. Sue Aikens is actually on the show Life Below Zero. I think it's on National Geographic, but I have not seen that show. I heard about her because Joe Rogan did an interview with her on his podcast, and I have to say she is probably one of the most inspirational women I have ever heard about in my eyes after this interview. She is actually the warden of Kavik River Camp in Alaska. She lives 500 miles from the nearest city and 80 miles from the closest road. During the hunting season, she will host hunters up there. And because she's not a native, she actually leases the land from the state. And because of this, they could kick her out at any time. So all of her housing has to be temporary. They're kind of like trailers on tracks that can be moved that the guests can stay in. And then she lives basically tents. And during non-hunting season, during the winter months, it's very, very rough for her. To top it off, 6 years ago, Sue was actually attacked by a grizzly bear who was trying to claim his territory. She said that, this is what she said about it, I had to sew my head together, my arm, and before my hips popped out, I went across the river, found the bear, and shot him. And I called the trooper, and I laid there for 10 days. And it was 10 days before anyone even got to her to take her to a hospital. She was very near death. During this time while she was getting surgeries, I believe she said a company came in. I guess they do a lot of oil rigging up there or something. Used her property and her supplies while she was gone. And she didn't find out until she usually burns her trash up there so as not to attract animals. Well, the company didn't burn their trash when they were done, and she found some of, I guess, their invoices or something like that. But she didn't pursue it. She decided to move on. She said they would have to live with themselves for being jerks, and she wasn't going to let it affect her. And she wasn't going to let getting attacked by a grizzly bear stop her from doing what she loved. She very easily could have left her life in Alaska, moved somewhere easier, and not had to deal with the harsh winters or bears or the wolves. But being the warden is what she loves doing, and so she didn't let it stop her. She didn't let it shut her down. She had her surgeries, and within months, she was back at it. She is a prime example, I believe, of being your own hero and not being a victim. Well, I hope you guys gained something from this episode, that it was a little bit inspirational. If you have any suggestions or questions, you can email me at themelcavepodcast@gmail.com. You'll also find me on YouTube and Facebook at The Mel Cave Podcast. I'm thinking about maybe doing, if I get some questions, a little question and answer section at the end of every episode. So if you would like to be on the show, or at least like to have your questions answered on the show, be sure to send it in. Everyone have a great week.